This is a repeat performance. We had you before, Eileen, and we really appreciate your taking time from a busy schedule to join us today.
Sure. Well, I appreciate you all having me, and I assume you can see the slides now. So yeah, thanks everyone. My name is Aileen Winquist. I work for Environmental Services, and I believe our department director, Greg, I think, did he come to speak to you last month? So I don't remember exactly what he covered, if he touched on the stormwater utility, but so yeah, I work with our stormwater management program, and I work on communications and engagement on a variety of our programs and projects that we have going on around the county. So I may have interacted with you in various other projects, civic association meetings, commissions, things like that. So today we just wanted to talk a little bit about a change that the county is considering for funding our stormwater management program. And so one thing the county board has asked our department to kind of explore over the past couple of years is transitioning to a stormwater utility. So here's the agenda of what I'm going to cover today, but I'm obviously open to other questions as well. So. And Anita had mentioned, I didn't want to go through the entire story map, Anita, because I was worried we might kind of go down a rabbit hole and then not get back to talk about the utility. But I did want to highlight this flood resilient Arlington story map that we put together. And I think a few of you had looked at it and enjoyed it. And so it is really useful kind of to understand how Arlington developed and how that affects some of our challenges that we're dealing with today in terms of our streams and flooding challenges and the type of development that we've experienced. So you can see here on the map. So basically in Arlington, our early development, because of when it occurred, primarily in the 40s and the 50s, after World War II, was primarily unregulated. There were no requirements at that time protecting streams or requiring stormwater management. So you can see in this map in the middle here shows the dashed sort of lines, hash mark lines, are all the streams that basically were lost at that time, were buried into storm sewer. So the solid blue lines are our remaining streams that we have today. But you can see we lost over about 60% of the natural stream network that we have in the county. And so how that affects us today in terms of flooding, you can see the map here on the right shows it's a heat map kind of showing where we've been experiencing, more recently, kind of the more repeated and severe flooding. And so you can see in some of these areas, Spout Run and some of these watersheds here, do tend to be the watersheds where we really have no remaining streams. So everything, the streams were all buried, and then neighborhoods and businesses and roads and everything were built on top of those storm sewers, which isn't really a problem, for smaller storm events. But when we do have the larger storm events, if those storm sewers become overwhelmed, where those streams used to exist, are still low points. There's still kind of a low point in the topography. And so those areas, still are at risk. And so there is a practice, normally with stormwater management, if Arlington was developed, kind of at a later time, where they plan for what's called overland relief. And so that's really a safe flow path. There's always, no matter how big you make your storm system or your pipes, there can always be a larger storm. And so they always want to plan, for something that might be larger than the storm capacity. And so overland relief is an important factor, in storm system design. But that was not something, that was necessarily taken into account, at the time that Arlington developed. So anyway, I just wanted to highlight the story map here, and it's definitely something you may want to check out after we chat today. And I can put the link, it's here on the slides, but I can put it in the chat as well. So in response to these flooding challenges, and some of you may, I don't know where everyone lives, if you're in any of the watersheds that have been dealing with these, more extreme flooding issues, Arlington has we've pivoted our stormwater program and really tried to take more of a resilience focus. So these are all areas that we are working on more, recently. We are doing more analytics and data assessment. We did in 2014, a stormwater master plan. We had assessed the majority of our storm system and identified areas where we needed upgrades, but we're also doing a new analysis at this point that is looking at climate change as well. And, one thing people may not realize is that actually the rainfall curves, sort of the tables that the engineers use when they're designing storm systems, had actually not been updated for 20 years. Those come from NOAA, from the federal agency. And so that's another factor that, obviously, we all know, kind of in recent years, we have, experienced an increase in intensity in our storm events. And so we are creating some local, updates to those rainfall tables that we can use for our upcoming design, because anything that we build, storm systems that we're building now could potentially be in the ground for, 50, 75, even 100 years. And so we want it to be, prepared, for future climate, and not just, kind of more of a past view there. So another important strategy that we are undertaking is looking for, new locations for storm capacity projects and new types. And so you can see the picture on the top left here is a large stormwater vault that is under construction at the Cardinal Elementary School. And this is right next to the Westover commercial shopping area that was, very heavily impacted in the 2019 storm. And so that's an example of trying to be a more innovative and look for, in the past, we had primarily, installed larger pipes, kind of in the same locations, maybe where the storm pipes were, but we are trying to add new types in detention and storage, within the system. So that was an opportunity, that came up because the school was under construction, and this large vault is being constructed underneath the athletic fields. So once it's done, and actually if you go by there today, they are at the point where the large vault is nearly complete. They're backfilling on top of it, and then we'll, build the fields on top of that. So it will be, pretty much invisible, but we'll be there, in case of a large storm event. So some other strategies that we have undertaken: we have increased our stormwater requirements for development projects. That was done in 2021. Prior to that, since 2014, we have required stormwater management for new homes, and large home additions. But in 2021, we increased those requirements again, and I have some more information about that if I know that's often a cause, for concern for folks. Another really key point is increased funding for the program, and this kind of relates to the stormwater utility and why we are looking at changing, our funding mechanism to a utility. But the recent CIP that was adopted, the FY 23 to 32 CIP, represents a significant investment and is almost $300 million more than what was available for the stormwater management program in the prior CIP. So it is a significant investment. The county did a bond in 2020 for the first time, put a bond to the voters, and that was approved. And there will be an additional bond for stormwater this fall on the ballot as well. And so that again shows the community support. I think we definitely have heard from the community about their interest and desire in making these resilience upgrades and improvements.
Well, Aileen, we've got a couple of comment questions.
Okay.
One of them is, how do you find new types of treatments like the big vaults at Westover? Are there other communities out there on the leading edge of stormwater management that you are in touch with? Is there some sort of national organization?
Yeah, I mean, we have our engineering staff, and so they participate in, regional. There are definitely regional groups that, discuss these resilience issues, but obviously flooding and resilience is, not something unique to Arlington right now. I mean, you may, hear sort of internationally and across the country, it's something that is a significant issue in a lot of places. So, some of these new strategies, I think the vaults is not necessarily something that, is a brand new idea, but it is something that, other states are doing as well. I know there are several large ones. I think, we've talked to the company that is installing, or the concrete modules, that we're using are from a certain company, and they have talked to other folks that are working on one in Texas and I believe in New Jersey. So we do, communicate with other localities around the country to find out different strategies, but there's a lot of professional, organizations and conferences and ability, opportunities to exchange information and successes, I think so.
And a related question, do we use in-house engineers to design these projects, or is it contracted out?
We do both. So we have in-house staff, and they actually design some things. And then I know for this project, I think we do have some contract staff as well. Sometimes our staff may do part of it, and then, as it moves, to the construction phase, they have contractors. So I think, I think we do, again, depending on the type of project, we do both. So.
And the last question is whether you could repeat your explanation of what overland relief means.
Sure. Yeah, so overland relief is basically a safe flow path for water to get to the nearest stream or water body during a very large storm event. So, I mean, you obviously have storm drains and storm sewer pipes and things like that. But no matter how large of a storm management system that you build, there's always an opportunity for a bigger storm event to come along. And so in doing the engineering, design, and planning for these systems, they always want to think about, this sort of backup system. And so overland relief is really intended to be a backup, for when these really large storm events come. And so when, for system design, if Arlington was built today, as opposed to, almost 100 years ago, there would be more planning for these overland relief pathways, as part of the system design. But actually that kind of connects to this other point we have here about the voluntary property acquisition. And that is something that is a new strategy, that we are looking at in Arlington and, in some very focused areas, because as I mentioned before, when the streams, were buried and homes were built on top of those, those areas are still low points. So even though there's a storm sewer underground, it's still a low point. And so during a big storm, the water is going to go there. And so unfortunately, if your house is there, there's really not a lot, and again, this is in very, a few areas around the county, there's not a lot for the county to do really in terms of the system, to reduce the flood risk. So in a few locations, we are going to be, talking to property owners and see if there would be an interest, because if we can remove some of those homes from those areas, we can recreate those overland relief flow paths, to kind of overall improve the effectiveness of the system. So again, that is a voluntary process. So at this point, I think last year the county has purchased one property that was very severely flooded in the 2019 storm. And so, we will be again looking, it's not, large numbers, but it will be very focused areas that are in these kind of more high risk locations.
And we've had another question came in.
Okay.
Have we had any major fails of recent infrastructure, or do you have anything on a, this is a problem we need to fix list?
I don't think, I'm trying to think of any failures. I mean, sometimes, it's probably been a number of years where, there will be like a culvert or something maybe that blocked or failed. We do have a couple culverts that are, in design to be replaced, I believe. The one under Military Road, I think, and there also is the one on Dumbarton Street. There are some that, that we're working on design and will be replacing. But I don't believe we've had any, any large failures. And really part of this increased funding in our storm system, is we want to be kind of more proactive in terms of assessing the system, and addressing problems, obviously, before it becomes, a critical failure, because that's, obviously a more risk. And then you have to do an emergency repair, which is going to be more expensive than, when you can plan it and take care of it, in a more methodical way. So. All right, I want to jump into the utility information just so let me see how we're doing on time here. Okay, so that just was some background on flood resilient Arlington and some of the efforts that we are making to respond to these more intense and more severe storm events. So For some background, I don't know if you're all aware, one thing we found out, we did some feedback form in July. We found out that most people really do not understand actually how they pay for stormwater today. And so I will share some information on that. But currently everyone does, or most property owners do contribute to stormwater management, and it's through a sanitary district tax, and it's based on your property's assessed value. So that is included with your real estate tax. So it's not really a separate bill, or it's not a separate line. It's just kind of combined with your real estate tax. So that's why most people don't really, understand how much they pay, because it's combined with the other bill. So the utility would just be a different way to pay for the stormwater management program, but it would be based on the impervious area or the hard, developed surfaces on your property, as opposed to the property assessment. So it would be more similar to your other utility bills, your water, your gas, your electric. And so it's more of a user, fee, because the impervious area is a better measure of your use of the stormwater system than your property assessment. There's really no correlation between a property assessment and the amount of runoff. There's not really a good correlation there. So just for a little background, as I mentioned, a lot of people don't know, what they pay now. So under the current funding mechanism, it's the sanitary district tax. It's a part of your real estate assessment, and it's 1.7 cents per $100 of the assessed value. And so a property with an $800,000 assessment is currently paying about $136 per year. So it's about maybe $11 a month or so is what you're paying at this time. A little background on impervious area. And again, these impervious areas are just any portion of a property that's covered with hard surfaces where, rain cannot run into the ground. So it's, roofs, driveways, patios, walkways, those surfaces. And so again, impervious area is a better measure of your property's use, and impact on the storm system than the property assessment. So why is the county considering changing to a stormwater utility? So as we mentioned, we are making these increased investments in the storm system. So, the costs that everyone pays for stormwater management will need to go up, to compensate for those increased investments. But I think we all, realize that they are, very important in terms of our, all of our public safety and sort of community benefits. So again, it is something that we've heard from the community, that there is a desire, to make these investments and improvements. So, and really a stormwater utility generally is a fair way to fund the stormwater management program, because it is based more on the demand that the property puts on the system. Again, the real estate assessment, which is, what it's based on currently, there's not really a good correlation between the real estate assessment and the amount of runoff. So a stormwater utility would actually include properties that are currently tax exempt, which do contribute runoff, but currently, do not pay towards stormwater management. So what would the utility fund? And it generally, it's going to fund the same programs that are funded by the sanitary district now. And so this is really maintenance of the system, a lot of the assets, culverts, inlets, storm drains, other components of the system. The important funding to upgrade the system and increase capacity and add some of these facilities that we're, looking at to try to reduce flood risk in some of the critical watersheds. We also have water quality and regulatory requirements that we need to meet as well. We have a permit from the state of Virginia, which mandates that we undertake a lot of different activities to reduce water pollution. So some of those include projects. And so you can see on the photo here on the bottom left, that is one of our rain garden Green Street facilities. And so we are installing more of those around the county. And those are really facilities that help to add stormwater management where there currently isn't any stormwater management. So it helps to slow down and filter pollutants from the runoff. Now they are really more a focus of improving the water quality of the runoff. They are not necessarily a flood mitigation measure. So they typically can manage about an inch of rainfall, from a certain drainage area, but in a larger storm event, they overflow to the storm drain as well. So you can see, all the different activities here that, are currently funded through the sanitary district TAP, which would also be funded with a stormwater utility. So now there are some new costs with the stormwater utility, including some operating costs, for staff to manage the utility. And then as part through the state of Virginia, if you have a stormwater utility, you are required to have a credit program. And so this offers credits to property owners that undertake activities that would help reduce runoff and some other designated activities or actions. And so I'll talk a little bit more about our draft credit program that we have been putting together. So just a little bit about how the utility would work. So the impervious area is measured using the county's mapping information that we have through our system, and some of these maps are also public, so you can go on and use some of those as well through the county website. So they would create an estimate of the square footage of impervious area on the property, and for there would be what's called an ERU or a billing unit is established for the county. And so this is based on sort of the average impervious area or the median for properties around the county. So so this varies, depending on what locality you're in, but for Arlington, this median is about 2,400 square feet for each parcel. So that is kind of established as one billing unit for the utility.
We have a question on that. Have you determined what the rate that you're going to charge is going to be?
I'll talk a little bit about that. Actually, I think probably, on this slide or the next one. The rate is not established as of yet. So that would be established as part of the budget process. And so it would be adopted in the spring. So in terms of process, if the board, does decide to move forward with transitioning to the utility, they would vote on that in the spring as part of the budget process. And also as part of that, they would adopt a rate. So at this time, the range that we are looking at for one ERU is about 200. We're kind of giving a range because, again, we don't know exact, until they kind of go through all the budget calculations. $230 to $250 for one ERU. That is the current estimate. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the rate structure. And so as part of a utility, there are rate structure aspects that you determine. So the proposed rate structure that we are looking at for single family properties, you can see here. And so it would be kind of dividing the properties into different tiers based on the impervious area. So you can see the first tier would be properties with less than 1,600 square feet. And so they would be charged kind of a portion of one ERU 0.6. Tier 2 would be properties that are around, more of that median area. They would be charged one ERU. And then tier 3 would be 1.7. Those are ones that are kind of at a higher level. And then any single family property that's over 4,800, which is not a large number, would be just charged per their ERU, so as opposed to the tiers. So I do have a graphic here that kind of shows all the single families properties in Arlington, kind of how they break out. So you can see basically 90% of single family properties fall into tier 1 or tier 2. So basically would be paying 0.6 ERUs, or tier 2 would be paying 1 ERU, which again would be in that 230 to 250 range that we're estimating. Let's see if I have any other notes here. Yeah, so that's really the main point there. You see a smaller number, about 10% are over that, that level, sort of the median of 2,400 in that higher category. So for multifamily properties, there were a couple different options that were considered in terms of the rate structure. The current preferred option, you can see here, would be basically a flat rate option, which would be for multifamily properties in Arlington would be charged 0.18 of an ERU. So that's looking at all the ERUs for multifamily properties in Arlington divided by all the units, and the reason why this is a benefit is that one of the impacts with a utility obviously is properties that are more horizontal, kind of lower and more spread out, do have to, do have more impervious area and would have to pay a higher fee. And so some of those properties also include some of the garden style properties in Arlington, some of our affordable housing. And so this flat rate option is one, that seems to be preferred in terms of feedback that we receive, because it does offer, some benefit and protection, for these affordable housing properties. So just a little background also, you can see here in the graph, basically kind of the breakdown of the different categories. So on the left here, this is our current funding mechanism, the sanitary district tax. You can see kind of the breakouts. So this is, again, the fee that's based on property assessment, but you can see how it differs when you look at the actual impervious area for these different categories. So single family residential does have, more of the impervious area kind of relative to the other areas. And so currently with, when it's based on property assessment, this multifamily category is paying a higher amount, comparatively to the amount of impervious area. So again, it's just, kind of showing the breakouts. This again, the one on the left is the current funding mechanism, but the one on the right is looking at it, allocating it based on impervious area. So in terms of impacts, there are some burden shifts, with the utility. And so, as I mentioned, at any property that is more flat, more horizontal, with more hard surfaces, could potentially pay more under a utility. So there are some shifts, with single family residential, strip retail, those garden style properties. But again, that's one reason we were looking at the flat rate option under the multifamily. And so it can be also a reduction for, more vertical properties, multifamily and commercial properties that are, taller. They may have a very high real estate assessment, but they may, because of their vertical nature, not have as much of an impervious footprint. So those properties could see a reduction. And then again, we do have the discontinuation of the exemption, for properties that are currently tax exempt, would pay a fee under a stormwater utility. Oops, jumped ahead. All right, and I see that I'm not looking at the chat, but let me know if there are other questions, or we can kind of touch on questions at the end.
Yeah, we've got quite a few questions.
Okay, I know this is a lot to yeah, so I'll try to zip through the rest, then we can take questions. So this slide here, just wanted to let people know we've been doing a lot of engagement. We have an advisory group that we have been working with that has representatives from a lot of different sectors in the community, the Civic Federation, AOBA, and affordable housing representatives, some of our faith groups. And so we've been meeting with them throughout the year. We had an open house and a feedback forum in July. And we're having a meeting later this month with some of the faith organizations again, because of the change, with the tax exemption. So again, there's just some information there. A little bit of information that we got from our feedback form. We did seem, people do seem to understand that it agrees that it makes sense to bill based on, stormwater based on, as a utility, and that it should be, based on the amount of runoff generated, by a property. So, and then we also had very high levels of support, people feeling that it is very important or somewhat important, to maintain our storm system, to reduce flood risk. And also we had a similar question about improving, water quality and protecting our resources. That again was a very high, level of support with 90%. So, again, we're seeing that level of community interest and support. So I did just want to touch on the draft credit program, and then I'll try to hit on the questions. So the stormwater credit program is a requirement, from the state. And so it has, a variety of different goals, to sort of promote, some private sector awareness, but we do want to make sure that the program is not very complicated to administer and acknowledge, behaviors, positive behaviors of property owners. So the credit program would include both mandatory and voluntary actions. So, when a property redevelops today, people are required to install storm facilities for stormwater management. And so those facilities, would be available for credit, even though that was something that they were required to install. That is something that that we do have to offer credits for, but then there will also be credits for voluntary actions that people can take. So there would be up to potentially 35% credit available for, a combination of actions that people can take with the credit program. So for the mandatory facilities, and this would be for all the customer types, multifamily, residential, or non-residential. The credit would be based on when the facility was installed, because the performance standards have increased over time with those. So the most recent facilities are installed with the highest performance standard would be available for up to 15% credit. Ones that were installed a little longer ago, with a lower standard, would be available for 5%. So just wanted to present a little bit about that. And then we also have voluntary actions that people can take. And so these are some of the activities that would be available potentially for credit. These would probably range from a 5 to a 10% credit, an annual credit on your bill. And so a permeable driveway, rain gardens, would potentially be a 10%. And then native plant landscaping, rainwater collection, such as a rain barrel cistern, tree planting, would be likely like a 5% credit. So again, there would be a process, to apply for those once the utility is set up. So, and then in the multifamily and non-residential area, we did want to offer, and this is directly with some feedback from our faith group members on our advisory committee, that, because this is a new, with faith organizations being currently tax exempt, the stormwater utility fee would be a new expense for them. So we have included some volunteer activities here that some of those faith groups could undertake to potentially receive 10% credit for each activity. So they could look for a reduction in their fee through some of those activities. So you can see some options here that we were considering for the credit program. And then I know some of you may be very interested in your properties in impervious area and the estimate of the fee, what you might owe under this. So we do have a fee estimator that is, we're just almost ready to be releasing. So I can definitely share the link for that. It should probably go live. I think we were planning on this week, so it's not quite up yet, but I will definitely share that when it's available. So you can see what it looks like here is you can click on each property and you'll have a little pop-up, and it would give, the estimate for the impervious area and the number of ERUs for that particular property. And so you can get an idea, how the utility would affect you there. So, and there is my information, and I'll go ahead and stop sharing, and then we can look at the chat here and see. This is an annual fee. So again, as we've estimated, it's $230 to $250 per ERU. That is an annual fee. So, not, I know obviously budgets, are a challenge, I think for everyone right now, but it's still definitely, much lower than a lot of our utilities that we pay. The credits would be likely each year. So that's something I think we're still looking at, would we give a credit, for a longer period of time? But I think at this time we were thinking that they would be, renewed year to year. We did a feedback form, and so it was not a statistical survey, but we did share a feedback form in July, and we had about 600 responses. So, we do have some more information. I didn't share all the feedback that we received. But it was, something that we wanted to get some, a measure of people's thoughts on the utility and some of the stormwater system.
So, Eileen, this is incredible amount of information and so timely.
Okay.
We just perfectly scheduled you for this presentation and all these questions. You're starting to respond to the questions that are in the chat, but I'm going to roll back up to where we kind of didn't present them to you. Gary, do you want to group them or do you want to just read them? We do like to read the question that comes in, so anybody who's not on the video or open it to the chat can hear what the question is.
Okay, I think I'll go. I think we did, we answered Anita's question about the types. The CIP, someone asked, what is a CIP? The CIP is the Capital Improvement Program. So it is kind of a companion. The county has the operating budget, which is sort of the ongoing day-to-day funding. The Capital Improvement Plan is a longer term plan that deals with significant, capital construction projects. So it's something that, we use for, larger building and construction projects. So the CIP is generally a 10-year plan, but it is updated every 2 years. So it deals with larger, capital investments, terminology. So I think we answered this.
Was how do really large trees help with stormwater management? Do they just suck up the water or what exactly?
Sure. Yeah, definitely trees and vegetation, do help, with stormwater management on your property. I think when we're talking about flooding types of storms, what the studies have shown is that during a smaller, less intense storms, the trees do intercept, and prevent some of that water. But as the storm gets more intense, that benefit or that reduction from the tree, goes down. So I think they're, more critical, for the smaller, less intense storm events.
Okay, the next question was, how did you settle on impervious area as the yardstick? That doesn't seem to take into account variations in topography and existing mitigations. And you've talked about credits for mitigation efforts, so I think you've addressed that. But what about the issue of variations in topography? And there was another question further down related to that. What about people whose property, the stormwater runs directly into a stream rather than into the sewer system?
Sure. Yeah, the impervious area, because obviously we don't have a meter, like for your water bill, everyone has a water meter. And so they have an exact measure, of your use of water and of your discharge to the wastewater system. So for stormwater, we don't have that. So impervious area is really, again, the best proxy or way to estimate runoff from the property. It doesn't necessarily take into account, like you said, topography. So we're not, calculating, well, there's going to be more runoff here because of the slope, but it's really it's the best proxy or estimate. And it's definitely better, as we talked about, currently we are using real estate assessment, which again, really has no correlation, with the amount of runoff. So this stormwater utilities are something, around the country that other localities, have undertaken as well. So that generally is the approach, is looking at the impervious cover and hard surfaces on the property.
Okay, we're about 10 minutes to 11, just so you know.
Okay.
The next question is, will the Stormwater Utility Fund still receive CIP funds from the county's budget?
Yeah, so basically the stormwater utility will help. One of the things with the bonds, that the county has undertaken recently for stormwater management is that we do have debt service, that we'll have to pay on those bonds. So the stormwater utility will, again, helps to pay for a lot of the operating, and other expenses, with the stormwater management funds. So yeah, we wouldn't necessarily, even though we have the CIP funding and some of that is, supported with the bonds, we do have to pay debt service on those as well. So the stormwater utility, funding will still be important, even with the increased CIP funding.
Next question is, in fee simple townhouse ownership, is the tax included in the individual townhouse owner's realty tax, or is it tax to the homeowners association as a whole?
I think if you are, an owner, like a condo owner or a townhouse owner, and you get, your individual real estate assessment, then it would, come directly to you. If you are, again, live in an apartment, where, it's it goes directly to the property manager, then it would be included, as part of the rent. So I believe, again, if you are listed as an owner, with a condo or a townhouse, then it would, come directly to you versus via the HOA.
Next question. This person said that all of the water that comes onto their roof goes into gutters and downspouts that flow out onto their lawn.
Mhm.
So it's not, running into the street. So why is their roof considered impervious area?
Sure. Yeah, we have had this question because some folks have said, well, some of my runoff goes into my yard, and so we have included that as part of our FAQs. So I think, we all have to remember is, even though maybe in smaller storm events, a lot of that water, some of that water initially goes into our yards. In these really big storm events, generally every property will have, some runoff that is coming, because even the lawn, will get saturated, and water will start to run off into the system. And really, we all benefit, from a well-maintained and updated stormwater management system, in terms of our overall safety and, access to the roads and transportation system, and even protection of our infrastructure, our wastewater, our electrical systems, all these things, it's a critical system to kind of protect the community overall. So it's not always, again, the impervious area on the property is again, a proxy to kind of come up with that estimate of the fee, but we all benefit broadly from the, well-maintained and updated storm system. And you may have heard that recently, with the flooding that happened, I think, in Alabama, with their water treatment, systems that were affected by that, and then impacts there. So again, these systems are really critical for the community overall.
Okay, we've got messages piling up, so.
Okay, yeah, I'll just keep going. Would the county be paying towards?
Will the county be paying towards the utility based on its impervious surfaces?
So yeah, there is an exemption with any property owner in a locality that has an MS4 permit, which the county does have. So there are some other, properties in the county, for example, I think like George Mason University, some of the larger ones. So we do have this MS4 permit, has a lot of requirements and mandates associated with that. So, the county wouldn't necessarily be paying, for our impervious areas. That is just something that is an exemption as part of the state requirements for utilities.
And you did say earlier that commercial businesses are going to be paying into the utility based on their impervious areas, including parking lots.
Mm-hmm.
Does a single family home that has French drains installed make a difference in the ERU?
I think right now, again, that would be something, anything that you had potentially installed on your property, could be a potential credit. I don't know that we were, at this time, we did not include French drains as a potential credit, but and there are, actions, that people can take in terms of, like we talked about, some of the landscaping and rain garden or pervious surfaces. So, but at this time, we did not have French drains as one of those credit options.
Okay. Does the county really expect to receive money from the federal government? Post offices, other government buildings come to mind?
That's not something we have talked a lot about in our internal meetings. So, to be honest, there are, a lot of staff that are working on this project. So I can find out some more about that. I don't know, who, who's been coordinating in terms of the federal government properties, but.
You've talked about other places that have moved to this kind of approach to funding stormwater management. Are you getting feedback from any of them? Are they happy with the way they've done it?
Yeah, and even locally, a lot of the other local governments are in the area, Alexandria, City of Fairfax just switched to utility, Falls Church, Prince William County, quite a few of the other localities, right around this area do have stormwater utilities. So yeah, we definitely have talked to them in terms of lessons learned and any advice or tips that they have. But I think generally it is a positive, having, a dedicated, funding source. Arlington has had since 2008, when we set up the sanitary district tax, a dedicated funding source for the stormwater management program. But again, the stormwater utility, does have the benefit kind of trying to be, more fair, in kind of assigning the costs, to the users.
Okay, a comment here that bushes are more effective than trees in sucking up water.
Okay. Thanks.
Somebody wanted you to repeat the definition of an ERU.
ERU, sure. Yeah, it's equivalent residential unit. And so it's really basically the billing unit for the stormwater utility. So it is 2,400 square feet, for Arlington County. And in preparation for making this potential transition to a stormwater utility, the county did do a feasibility study working with a consultant, Raftelis, who works on these types of projects around the country. And so that's one thing, that was part of their assessment, was doing some kind of sampling of properties around the county to determine what that median amount was, and kind of make a proposal for that ERU, for the counties.
Question here, our stormwater doesn't get treated the way that our household wastewater does, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, so basically stormwater runs, as it runs off your yard and into the street and into the storm drain, it flows, directly to our streams. So unless you have some type of treatment facility in your yard, like a rain garden, or unless, some of the runoff goes through, one of those Green Street facilities, like I kind of shared, earlier in the presentation, unless there's some localized stormwater management facility that is treating it, the majority of it is not treated. And so that again gets back to why it's so important that we all, think about our activities in terms of, picking up after our pets and minimizing fertilizer and chemicals around our yard. Even when you have contractors coming to work, making sure that they're not, washing concrete and paint and things into the drain. They may be working outside in your driveway, but just something to consider. Those are unfortunately, problems, that we see. Sometimes we'll get a report that, 4 Mile Run is turned white, or, is full of, some kind of a contaminant, and then we'll have to figure out, where that's coming from. So we can all definitely play a part in minimizing those types of discharges.
So when are we going to expect to see these changes in our real estate bills?
Well, the schedule right now is that we're actually going to be reporting back to the board, I believe, in October or November. And so, one piece of this is engagement and kind of, working with the community and getting feedback, but there's also a lot of behind the scenes and sort of technology, challenges with kind of converting to this utility. So the earliest that it would be go into effect, if the board approved it in the spring, then it would, I think, take effect with the June. I think there's a June with the summertime initial bill. So it would still be included as part of your real estate bill. But it would be, kind of designated as the utility, as opposed to kind of combined with the real estate tax. So that would be the earliest. If, there are any, issues with implementation, it's possible that, that schedule could be pushed back a little bit. But again, the springtime would be when the board would be considering, voting on this.
So it's 11 o'clock, and some of the people on our Zoom session will drop off now, and maybe we should stop recording. But the questions are still coming in, and one that maybe would be a good pulling together here is, this is really good information, Aileen. Again, we think this is excellent timing. You do a great job presenting the material. What's your background?
Sure. My background is I have a bachelor's degree in environmental earth science from Johns Hopkins, and then I have a master's from UVA in environmental science, similar kind of area. I did for graduate school, I did kind of more work with groundwater contamination and transport, and then professionally, my first jobs, I worked at a consulting firm, and then I've actually been with the county for 22 years. So I kind of got into the stormwater realm and and have just stayed on, and it's been very interesting because I think one of the appealing factors is we always have new projects coming and different things happening. So we've had a lot of interesting projects with our stream improvements, with 4 Mile Run and Donaldson Run and Windy Run. We've done some work on improving the streams there. Right now we have the Ballston Pond project under construction. So some of you may, I know Anita said we did a tour. So that's going well. It should be, finishing up in kind of the winter, into the spring. I think they're getting into planting the pond right now. The vault, someone asked about the vault at the Cardinal Elementary School. And so the way that works is there's actually an 80-inch storm sewer pipe that runs basically between the school and the athletic fields. It's buried. And so again, that was very likely, the former stream. And so it was buried, and now there's a large storm sewer pipe in there. And so when a really large storm comes, there's, basically a level in there. When the water gets above a certain level, it will start diverting some of that flow into the vault, and the water will simply stay in the vault for a few hours, and then it will continue to drain out of the vault by gravity flow. So they have it, they have the slopes set so that the vault can drain on its own. It doesn't need to get, pumped out or anything like that. But basically the vault will sort of set aside, some of that water during really large storm events, to allow the rest of the system, to continue to carry water and prevent, the backups and the major flooding that we saw in 2019. So